start with a prayer.
तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। स्थावरं जङ्गमं व्याप्तं यत्किञ्चित् सचराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। चिन्मयं व्यापि यत्सर्वं त्रैलोक्यं सचराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः।
Gita Dhyana.
ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितं भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी। यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुवन्ति स्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः। ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यशान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणा। देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Okay, so verse number 30. We finished 30 or 30? We finish. So verse number 30, which says, the indwella in the body of everyone is ever indestructible, O Bharata, and therefore you should not grieve for any creature. And we saw that this really is the summary of the verses which Lord Krishna starts instructing Arjuna from verse number 11 right up to this verse number 30. And we saw that he has to address Arjuna's two issues. One is the condition under which Arjuna finds himself, which is overcome by grief. His eyes are full of tears, he is agitated, and that particular condition Lord Krishna has to address. And secondly, when Arjuna himself says, I am confused, I do not know what to do. So these two issues, out of that the first one is addressed in these verses from 11 to 30, and we saw that really the whole crux of the matter here is about self-knowledge. Okay. And because the self-knowledge is not there in Arjuna at that moment, he is in this Arjuna, what we call the Arjuna condition. Okay? And that is the Arjuna problem. What is the Arjuna problem? Really, if you think about it, what is the Arjuna problem? Is that he is seeing the phenomenal world of impermanence and transience, and he is taking that to be the reality. Okay? And taking that to be the reality, he sees that, all these people who are in front of him, his kith and kin, are going to die. And he is going to be responsible for killing these people. So the idea that he is the doer of this terrible action called killing, and because he is attached to those people who are across the battlefield from him, gives rise to this condition whereby he experiences extreme grief. Okay? Such an extreme grief that he becomes actually dysfunctional. He's not able to function in the world properly. Right? And dysfunctional means what? That he is supposed to be doing something according to any criteria in the middle of the battlefield. He's supposed to fight the battle, and what he is supposed to be doing, he is not able to do. And at the root of the problem, and which Lord Krishna immediately identifies, is the lack of self-knowledge. Okay. So, killing means for Arjuna to indicate that there is destruction going to take place, either destruction of the people across from the battlefield or his own destruction, and that destruction is giving rise to this tremendous grief which he is experiencing at that time. So that is the condition of Arjuna. And what Lord Krishna addresses in these 28 verses or so, how many verses is that? 29, no, 19 verses. 19 verses is addressing Arjuna by saying that, okay, you are thinking that killing is going to lead to destruction, but really it is not going to lead to destruction. It is only the appearance that this destruction is taking place, and really what is there, what is the essence of a person, is that which is indestructible. Okay. So the destruction which Arjuna is seeing is really a false delusion. Okay. And that false delusion has led Arjuna to a wrong conclusion that this is what is happening in the phenomenal world, and therefore there is attachment, and that attachment gives rise to the grief which he is experiencing. So what does it mean? I mean, for us, if we say Arjuna again is a representative of man, it means that for us, what is the lesson here? Right? What do we have to understand here is that we also do the same thing which Arjuna is doing. Okay. But because the Bhagavad Gita actually takes to the extreme condition whereby the circumstance is extreme and Arjuna's condition is extreme, we can see that in our daily day-to-day life, we may not experience this kind of extreme condition and extreme circumstance, but certainly to a lesser degree, we go through this process day in, day out. Isn't it? So we experience the ups and downs, we experience grief, we experience agitations in the mind, we experience all different kinds of things which are going on. Why? Because we have taken this particular life to be the reality. We have taken this thing to be real and say, okay, all these things which are changing all the time, this changing world, this phenomenal world is taken to be real, and in that changing phenomenal world, we find ourselves that even our thoughts and our moods and our feelings are constantly changing according to the circumstances in which we find ourselves, and that gives rise to confusion about what we should be doing, confusion about how we should be dealing with all these circumstances, and misunderstanding about the whole situation and the circumstance. Yeah. So for us, the solution is the Krishna solution. And the Krishna solution, which is given here in this 19 verses, is to go through this process of discrimination. Right? Lord Krishna is taking Arjuna through this process of discrimination and saying that one must discriminate between the impermanent and the permanent, the real and the unreal, the truth and the falsehood. Okay? So if we see in these 19 verses, actually they are actually, according to those categories of, the falsehood and the truth and the impermanence and the permanence, and what is impermanent and what is really permanent in terms of our own kind of way of believing. And if we see that all these things are addressed one way or the other by Lord Krishna, that the self is indestructible, it is permanent, it is that which is birthless, it is that which is deathless, and when you see the change, actually the change is not really the truth behind, or what is really what we see in the phenomenal world is not really the truth. Behind this changing phenomenal world, there is the indestructible self, which goes from one body to the next body, and therefore there is no need to grieve. If we understand it, if we discriminate in the right way, then our grief comes to an end. So this is the whole kind of way in which Lord Krishna is giving this solution to Arjuna. Now, you remember the second part of what Lord Krishna has to address to Arjuna is about, okay, now what shall we do? Because we have got, the idea that he is because of his ignorance, he is experiencing this grieving condition, but at the same time he's confused about the duty. So here, from verse number 31 up to 38, he is kind of bringing Arjuna down to this level of understanding what he should be doing. Okay? And here we see that his arguments are not, based on high philosophical things which he has been talking about so far. His ideas, like Gurudev is saying here, is to bring it down to the common man's view. Okay? The common man's view is what? Is that, yes, this is supposed to be done. This is how it is supposed to be done. And there is no further thinking about it. Even in the most ordinary way, if you think about all these things, Arjuna, what you should be doing is really standing up and fighting. Okay? So he is going to present various different ways of looking at the issue of Arjuna not being able to decide and to get rid of his confusion. So let's see what he says. We'll look at verse number 31 to start with, and we'll chant it first.
Swadharmam api chaveksha
Swadharmam api chaveksha
Vikampitum
Vikampitum
Dharmyadiyutashreenyo yat Kshatriyasya na vidyate
Kshatriyasya na vidyate.
So here, he starts by saying, Swadharma, your own duty, looking at your own duty, thou ought not to waver, for there is nothing higher for a Kshatriya than a righteous war. Okay. So, looking at his own Swadharma, and secondly, looking at the Dharma of a Kshatriya, there is no doubt that there is nothing higher. In other words, the ideal for a Kshatriya is being pointed out here to Arjuna, that you are a Kshatriya, you've got a certain Swadharma, and if you look at these two things and look at what is your duty under these circumstances, then there is nothing higher for a Kshatriya than a righteous war, and therefore you should go ahead and fight. Okay. Now, we know that Arjuna is a prince, okay, is a prince, and he belongs to the class of Kshatriyas. And here what Gurudev is saying, Arjuna belonged to the group of Kshatriyas not only by an accident of birth, but also by the quality of his inner mental constitution. Okay. So this is again, we have to recognize, there are two factors here. And the confusion comes because we are unable to respond to this particular way of thinking. In the sense that, number one, what is our Swadharma? Okay? So this is what Gurudev calls here the inner mental constitution. How do we recognize what is our inner mental constitution? Okay? And it's not an easy task, because to actually come to grips with what is my true inner nature when we are confronted all the time by so many factors which tend to inhibit our inner mental constitution. Isn't it? All the time there are forces around us, right? Circumstances around us, people around us who keep on pushing us in a different direction all the time. Okay? You should be doing this, you should not be doing this, etc., etc. When we know that our inner constitution is really in tension against all these things which are happening outside us in terms of the circumstance and in terms of the people around us. How many times we experience this in the family, right? We know that I am this kind of person, but I am being pushed by people all around me to say, okay, no, you are not, you're not supposed to be doing this, that and the other. You're supposed to be actually doing something else altogether, right? And we get caught up in everybody else's agenda, so much so that we forget that there is an inner constitution which is actually demanding us to live in a world and experience the world in a certain way. Okay. So this is the inner constitution. And here, what Gurudev is saying is that Arjuna's inner constitution was one of physical enthusiasm, the strength which is there, that he is a very active person. He's always doing something, and that is an expression of his inner kind of the rajas which is there in his own inner constitution, which is giving rise to this constant activity outside. Okay? And number two, he's talking about the moral inner constitution. In other words, there are certain rules which are propelling Arjuna and saying that no, this is the most important thing in my life, is that I believe truly in the moral condition under which I should be operating all the time. And this is very strong thing in Arjuna. Like any other Kshatriya, right? He has got this leadership quality which says that this is what I should be doing and this is how I should lead those who actually follow me. Then he is talking about intellectual alacrity, which means that his intellect is very active. Again, a quality of rajas and a bit of sattva as well, whereby that rajas is making his mind to be constantly thinking about all this kind of different kind of things. And finally he's talking about heroic daring. Okay, so in other words, he has got lots of courage. Lots of courage this physical constitution, this physical activity, the inner kind of rajas which is there, the outer rajas in terms of the body, in terms of his activity, all these are indications that Arjuna's mental inner constitution is one of a combination of rajas and sattva. And with that inner constitution, as a Kshatriya, then taking up his kind of duty in terms of his own position, in terms of his own circumstances life, as a Kshatriya, then all that inner constitution has to match up with the his particular kind of outer circumstance, and therefore kind of guide him in terms of what he should be doing. Okay, so looking at your own duty, okay, and looking at your own inner constitution, Lord Krishna is telling him that there is no higher duty for a Kshatriya than a righteous one. And if, when faced with the circumstances, what is a Kshatriya supposed to be doing? A Kshatriya is supposed to be fighting the righteous war. Now, it means that Arjuna, when he is confronted with this kind of situation, there is no choice but for him to stand up and fight. This is the idea which Lord Krishna is telling him, that taking into account your Swadharma, taking into account your own Dharma as a Kshatriya, the highest duty which is there for you is to actually stand up and fight. So even in the scriptures it says, indeed a Kshatriya should with weapons in hand protect the earth, righteous by which ensuring safety of his own subject and punishing the evildoer, and by conquering the enemy. This is what a Kshatriya is supposed to be doing according to the scriptures. As soon as we say here is a Kshatriya and here is a person with an inner constitution which matches that, then what is he supposed to be doing? He is supposed to be the protector. Okay, he is supposed to be the protector of the land and all those who are there, who are the subjects, and also at the same time to get rid of the evildoers and conquering the enemy. That is your job. Okay, that's his job description. Once you say here is a Kshatriya, then that is your job description. And if you say, no, I am not going to do that, then it means that somehow or the other something has gone wrong. So taking into account his dharma, his swadharma, and according to that what he is supposed to be doing and what is his highest ideal, then there is no other option but to fight. Okay? And this is the instruction which Lord Krishna is now telling Arjuna. So you see how now Lord Krishna has been talking about this very subtle subject called the self, and telling him about the nature and the characteristics of that self which is indestructible, which even he mentions, remember that it is something of a wonder. When people hear about it, they wonder about it. When they speak about it, they are full of wonder. Why? Because it is something which is completely unseen. Remember we said that when do we get surprised, when do we get filled with wonder? It is when we hear about something which we have not heard before, or when we see something which we have never seen before, we are filled with this kind of wonder. Okay? And this is the self he has been describing, this subtle self. And here he comes right down to the ground. Right? What is the ground reality? The ground reality is that you are a Kshatriya, you are supposed to be fighting. Here you are so confused, you are overwhelmed by all this kind of grief. What I'm telling you is that this is your duty, actually, as a Kshatriya, and taking into account your own duty, the highest thing which you should be doing at the moment is actually fighting a righteous war. So what is this righteous war? Is the righteous war of fighting against adharma. Okay. When confronted by evildoers and enemies who are propagating adharma, your highest duty is to get rid of these people. And therefore there is, from that point of view, there is no option but to actually go ahead in the battle and fight the battle. So, then he says, okay, and regarding other reasons why the battle should be fought, the Lord says in the next verse now, that what is the consequence of that? Okay, you are a Kshatriya and you are going to be doing your duty, and therefore you stick to your highest ideal and do what is required to be done. Then what is the consequence of that? Here it comes in the verse number 32.
Yatra kshaya chopapannam Swargadvaram apavritam Sukhinah kshatriya partha Labhante yuttama idrusham
Okay, so the gate of heaven, Swargadwaram, which is saying, happy indeed are the Kshatriyas, O Partha, who are called to fight in such a battle that comes of itself as an open door to heaven. So here he is telling him now, you are a Kshatriya, and the highest ideal for Kshatriya is to fight a righteous war. And here you are, this is your opportunity now. You are in the middle of this battlefield, and here's a righteous war which you're supposed to be fighting. And given this kind of opportunity, how is it that you're missing this kind of thing? So, in other words, that given this particular circumstance of the enemies, okay, the Kauravas who are an Aryan, who are adharmic, and who want to conquer you and to destroy Dharma, then how is it that you have seen this and you got this perfect opportunity of expressing your highest duty? Then how is it that you're not actually taking this opportunity? Because if you take this opportunity of fighting this righteous war, what is going to happen to you is that the door of heaven will be open for you. In other words, the highest ideal will lead to the highest reward. So what is the highest reward for a Kshatriya? Is that he is welcomed in heaven because he has fought this righteous war. So, what does it mean here? It means that, in terms of our own understanding, if we say to ourselves, the consequence of actually carrying out our own dharma, right? When we say that here is an opportunity for each one of us finding ourselves in the right condition, in the right circumstance. For example, if we are all householders, right? And we say that here is a householder and I am within this particular circumstance and condition of being in the household with the family, etc., etc., then here's a perfect opportunity for us to actually express our own swadharma and our own duty and responsibility. Discharging it in the right way, we find that a reward is actually accessible to us. Wow! In the first place, because we are carrying out our dharma, we will acquire the merits. Okay? The merits which we acquire is because we are carrying out the duties which we are supposed to be carrying out. Okay? And the other consequence, which is the much subtler consequence, is what? Is that when we are carrying out, and this is what is going to come later on in the Bhagavad Gita, is that carrying out these duties and our dharma with the right inner attitude, with the right inner belief, and with the right inner condition, what happens is that we begin to have inner purification. Okay? And that is ultimately the bigger reward. Okay, yes, we have got this reward whereby we are doing our duty. In just doing the duty itself, we get certain merits. And those merits allow us to live in the higher dimensions once we get out of this body. And the door of heaven, like for Arjuna, the door of heaven will be open because he has done his duty. Okay. So that is the general condition under which, when performing our duty, that is what is available to us. But on a much subtler level, what begins to happen is that inner purification begins to take place. Because we are carrying out our dharma in the right way, with the right inner attitude, with the right way of thinking, with the right discrimination, that inner purification, when it comes about, it is actually the pathway towards ultimate liberation. And this is actually not being indicated here, but certainly we should understand that there is this particular way of thinking which is Lord Krishna is going to bring to us later on in chapter number 3 as to how we should act in the world and to perform our and to discharge our duties and responsibilities in such a way, with such an inner attitude, that how to act in the world. That is the solution. Okay? And it leads back to what Arjuna's dilemma was, that how should I act in the world, because I'm confronted by this terrible action which I have to carry out. Then in what way should I do it so that it doesn't have any repercussions in terms of my own sense of being, my own kind of consequence of what will follow from there, etc., etc. So the basis of action in the world is here just hinted at, but what is directing Arjuna's attention towards is that being a Kshatriya and having a certain way of being in the world, and the highest duty which you are supposed to undertake as a Kshatriya is really this opportunity which is available to you, and if you miss this opportunity, then it is something which is going to be detrimental to yourself. So when you're called upon to fight this battle, what you should be doing is to stand up and fight. So there you are. This is the other thing, that okay, on the one hand you are a Kshatriya, on the other hand, if you do your ideal duty, then the door of heaven is open to you, and therefore that is the reward which you're going to get. Now what about the other side of it? Okay, there are rewards, but then if we fail to do that, then there are consequences as well. Okay, so the consequence of doing the right thing means that you're going to get to heaven. But if you then fail to do, then what happens is what we see in the next verse now.
Atha chetvam imam dharmyam
Atha chetvam imam dharmyam
sangramam na karishyasi
sangramam na karishyasi
tatah swadharmam kirtim cha
tatah swadharmam kirtim cha
hitva papam avapsyasi.
hitva papam avapsyasi.
So here's the consequence of not fighting the righteous war, and he says here, but if you will not fight this righteous war, then having abandoned your own duty and fame, you shall incur sin. Papam. So here is the consequence of actually not doing our dharma. Right? So if we look at all the Kauravas, they are actually engaged in all this kind of a dharma. Really, to the point of incurring so much sin, and they've already accumulated so much sin because they've been behaving so badly that they've reached a point whereby they have incurred so much sin. But here Lord Krishna is telling him that if you abandon your duty, If you abandon your duty, then the consequence is that not only will you be infamous, but also that you will incur sin. So now what does it mean to incur sin? So here sin, we have to understand it in the right way, and Guru gives us a kind of good guideline to think about this way of looking at sin. And here he is talking about sin as the mistake in the mind which acts contrary to essential nature of the self. So what does that mean? It means that here's an essential nature of the self. What do we mean by that? We mean that it is not the ego which we are talking about here. We are talking about the self as the pure self. We are talking about the highest self. We are talking about the pure self. Okay? When we talk about the pure self, we are talking about a certain way in which that pure self is going to express itself through the instruments of the body, mind, intellect. Isn't it? Given that the conditioning of the body, mind, intellect has disappeared through inner purification, then the divinity which is there will express itself in a certain way. When that is obstructed in one way or the other, in other words, the vasanas, the past conditioning, and the wrong way of thinking and the wrong way of feeling will lead towards the wrong way of acting in the world. And this wrong way of thinking and feeling and acting in the world is what is called as sin. So in other words, when we function in the world on the basis of the ego, what we are essentially doing is stopping the pure self from expressing itself. Okay? We have created a barrier. We have created a barrier for the self to express itself through our own ignorance, through our own past conditioning, and as soon as we do that, one way or the other, we are working against the pure self, and in that case, that is called a sin. So another way of looking at it is that any action which I carry out, which is going to strengthen my sense of identity, because at the base of all these things, when I'm in the world and functioning in the world through this sense of doership, through this sense of enjoyership, through this identity, I'm actually working against this idea of the pure self expressing itself. So anything which actually compromises the expression of the self through the functioning of the ego is leading towards sin. So anything which I am doing which is based on my vasana and which is strengthening this sense of identity with the body, mind, intellect, and also strengthening my attachment to not only my own self of being, but the things around me, which leads towards an increased and strengthened sense of doership and enjoyership, is really nothing but sin. Okay? So in other words, we are all living in sin, if you look at it from that point of view. Because how do we act in the world, how do we function in the world is simply our own selfish way of being in the world. Okay? As long as we keep on doing that, it is taking us away from the self. Anything which takes us away from the pure self is nothing but sin. Anything which takes us towards the pure self is punya. So here's pap and punya. Anything which takes us towards self, pure self, is punya. Anything which takes us towards the ego is pap. This is a simple way of understanding punya and pap. Okay? So when I say, okay, I'm doing all this punya, actually what I'm doing is making the body, mind, intellect to function in such a way that it is either thinking of the self or it is connecting with the higher self through the emotion, in other words, devotion. Okay? So in the first place, discrimination and detachment through the intellect, which is going to take me towards the real. In terms of my emotional being, when I practice devotion, one way or the other, even simply by chanting the name of the Lord, it is taking me towards the pure self, and therefore that is punya. And acting in the world in such a way that I am dedicating all my actions to the Lord, and whatever results I get as a result of that are taken as prasad from the Lord. In other words, the two principles of Karma Yoga. In that way of acting in the world and transacting in the world, I am actually going towards the pure self, and I am putting aside the ego, and therefore that becomes punya. Anything which is contrary to that is actually incurring sin. And therefore Lord Krishna is reminding that actually if you don't do the things according to what is your dharma as a Kshatriya, and you refuse to fight this righteous war, then you will incur sin, because actually denying yourself this opportunity of expressing your dharma is going to lead you towards the ego. And here we can see that Arjuna is now full of ego. One can say he is full of ego, and that is what has given rise to his Arjuna condition. Okay. And if he behaves in this similar manner, the consequence of that is that he is going to incur the sin. So here Gurudev is saying the underlying point here is that he is renouncing his swadharma. Okay. Like we said in the previous verse, that one's swadharma is an expression of whether you are a Brahmin or a Kshatriya or a Vaishya or a Sudra. Okay? And the inner constitution is a swadharma, and in this case, what the swadharma of Arjuna is that he is a Kshatriya, and therefore, if he falls under this heading of Kshatriya, therefore certain ways of being in the world and certain experiences and certain transactions which he is supposed to carry out are going to be aligned to his swadharma, and if he does that in the right way within the dharmic context, then that is the opportunity for him to actually not to incur the sin but to gain the merits one way or the other, and that is why he is talking about the open door to heaven. And the door to heaven will be open to him. Not only that, but through that process he begins to purify his inner self. So, and you remember Arjuna himself was talking about he is going to incur sin, this, that and the other, and in verse number 36 he is saying that sin will certainly accrue to us by killing these fellows. You remember he's talking about fellows. And here the mistake is that Arjuna is saying that killing is wrong. And killing is wrong, and he has become confused in his mind because killing is now associating with destruction of the bodies, and that idea has overtaken him to the extent that he is now believing that it is wrong to kill the wrongdoers, the fellows, the evildoers. Whereas his dharma is what? His dharma, according to the Shruti, according to the scriptures, is that as soon as a Kshatriya is confronted by any kind of felon or evildoer or wrongdoer or a dharmic person, he should be killed. So, having forgotten that, Lord Krishna is reminding, okay, if you forget to do that and you actually abandon your duty, then what is going to happen is that you're going to incur the sin. Right. So when we talk about dharma here, and here Gurudev is pointing out that dharma, we have already explained, is a law of being. Okay, and Sanatan Dharma is what we call normally called Hinduism is Sanatan Dharma. Okay, and the eternal law of being. the eternal law of being goes beyond all relativity of the time and space and circumstance. Okay. And this is the basis of self-knowledge. The basis of self-knowledge is to understand that this Sanatan Dharma is the law of that eternal law of being. Okay. Not the relative law of our own being of the ego. So in the phenomenal world, we take ourselves to be this identity, this ego identity. Okay? And that becomes the law of our being in the phenomenal world through the wrong identification. Whereas what the Sanatan Dharma is reminding us is that actually we are not this phenomenal identity, but rather there is that eternal self. And this is what Lord Krishna has been pointing out to Arjuna through various different ways of thinking about it in the last section which we saw between verse number 11 to 30. Okay. And this Dharma, when it is practiced in the right way, becomes not only the means of purification, but also the achievement of liberation. Okay. So, Dharma and Swadharma and the Sanatan Dharma are things which are very intimately related together. And if you understand this logic in the right way, if you understand this knowledge in the right way, then it becomes the basis of our discrimination, and that discrimination is going to lead us towards realizing who we truly are, and that realization is going to set us free from this phenomenal identity of the ego, and it is going to set us free from the cycle of birth and death. Okay. So, the negative consequence of not finding the war is sin, and we have understood sin in a certain way, and then that is the right way to understand it. So, anything which is which we ourselves, we have to think now, what is the lesson in this for us? As I said, that we've got to keep on relating what Lord Krishna is telling to Arjuna in our own way, in our own understanding, in our own lives, because only then the Bhagavad Gita will become relevant to us, and it will become knowledge which is useful for us. Okay. Why do I say useful? Because it is going to give us the real purpose of life. Not only real purpose of life, but it is going to get us to the goal of life. That is why the Bhagavad Gita is also said to be the manual of life and living. Okay? Why do we have a manual? If we have got a washing machine or a car or anything, appliance, we have got a manual which comes with it. With a computer, the manual comes with it, so that we can operate the instrument in such a way that it gives us what it is supposed to give us. Okay. What is life supposed to give us? Life is supposed to give us a certain purpose, a certain goal, and if we exercise this machine of the body, mind, intellect in the right way, then we will achieve the right purpose. Okay. And the Bhagavad Gita is giving us all different kinds of instruction as to what is it which needs to be tuned up, what is it which needs to be functioning in what way, and therefore doing all these things in the right way, we achieve the true purpose of life. Okay. So here again we have to think about, okay, I'm doing all these things in my life from a day-to-day basis. I'm thinking about various different things in various different ways. I'm carrying out all these actions in my own particular situation in life and circumstance in life. Am I doing the right thing? And if I'm not doing the right thing, then of course I am going towards papa. And if I'm doing the right thing in terms of what is my dharma and what I should be doing, then it is taking me towards punya. It is taking me in the right direction. So, not only will he incur sin, but what is going to be the reaction of all these people around him? Okay, so Kshatriya then is reminding him again that, okay, abandoning this particular war, not only will you incur sin, but something else will happen as well. Okay, which is now verse number 34.
Kathayishyanti te vyayam
कथयिष्यन्ति ते विराम्
सम्भावितस्य च कीर्तिः
सम्भावितस्य च कीर्तिः
मरणाद अतिरिच्यते
मरणादतिरिच्यते.
So, besides what he has already told Arjuna, is that, yeah, okay, on the one hand, if you do the right thing, then you'll attain heaven. If you do the wrong thing, you'll have to, incur sin. But also, people too will recount your everlasting dishonor. And to one who has been honored, dishonor is more than death. So he's talking about killing and killing others and he himself getting killed. Actually, if he realizes that he is a true Kshatriya, then what is most dishonorable than not to fight the war? And people will say, oh, Arjuna was in this war and he actually ran away. He abandoned the fight. He was supposed to fight, and Arjuna, of course, was known as one of the greatest warriors and archers of his time, and one of the most courageous people, and a great leader. And then when he runs away from battle, what is going to happen? People will recount your everlasting dishonor. Why is it a dishonor? Is because the honor for a Kshatriya is to fight a righteous war, to kill his unrighteous enemies, and if that honor is not coming to him because he is refusing to fight the war, then what is the consequence of that? Is that people are going to say, here is a coward, here is a person who is running away from the battlefield. We have honored this person so far, but look at him, now he is running away. So, if he is running away, then what is going to be experienced by Arjuna is this dishonor. So with his place in his society, in his community, in his particular dharma and swadharma, if that all is negated by Arjuna actually running away from the battlefield, then what is going to happen is dishonor. So beside the sin, dishonor will arise. And if you experience dishonor in this way, in this intense way, it can be nothing worse than death. Yeah. And we can see that even in various different examples, people who abandon their duty, they will have this sense of, oh my God, what have I done? This is going to actually incur such a dishonor in myself, and this sense of extreme regret that I was supposed to be doing this and I've done something completely opposite. And people, when they judge other people, what do they judge them on? See, this is what Lord Krishna is reminding him, that not only are you being judged at various different levels, but even the people who are actually looking at you will also judge you in a certain way. Okay? And we ourselves, all of us are being judged by one way or the other, isn't it? People are talking about us and saying, oh, look at this person, and look at that person, he's doing the right thing, he's doing so much good things, and honor and dishonor, and people begin to look at through these kind of lenses. Okay? And for the Kshatriya, if there is dishonor because he has actually run away from the war, then it can be nothing worse than death. So he is again reminding him that, this fame which you have acquired so far as the greatest Kshatriya of our times, this all will be swept away because you are now running away from the battle. So therefore, it means reconsider, think about what you are doing. You've got to fight this war, because not only it will bring dishonor, but it will also incur the sin. Okay. So now we think about, okay, Lord Krishna is talking about, the subtlest of the self, and now he's talking about gossip. You can see how he has kind of covered the whole range of human experience, whereby he's saying there is the subtlest of the self which you've got to look for, but on the other hand, the reality which you are experiencing now, even if you take that into account, it is showing that you must not abandon this war. Okay. And this is what Gurudev calls the common man's viewpoint, whereby in our day-to-day common point of view, we keep on, oh, this person has said this and this person has said this and I should be doing this and I should be doing that. That common point of view again is bringing him right to the level of saying, okay, other people are going to think, oh, this is dishonor for Arjuna, look at him and what he's doing and he's running away from the war, and therefore this dishonor which you're going to experience for yourself is actually going to be very painful for you. So even considering that, you should be fighting. Right. So then he is going on to emphasize this point in the next verse. Yeah.
Vayadranaduparatam Mansyante tvam maharathaha Yesham cha tvam bahumataha Bhutva yasyasi raghavam.
So moreover, besides all the, people who are going to talk about this dishonor, within the community, within the society, people will say Arjuna has run away. Think about these commanders. The great battalion commanders will think that you have withdrawn from a battle through fear, and you will be lightly held by them who have thought much of you and your heroism in the past. So what is the worst thing for anybody is to be thought about in this kind of negative way by our own peers, right? Our own equals who are in the same category as we are. If somebody actually makes a judgment within that particular circle of our own peers and say, look at this person, he doesn't know what he's doing. Whether we are in the household, whether we are in the workplace, whether we are in any kind of social situation, when the peers who actually review us, the peer review, when that particular way of people looking at us within our own circle and our own level, when they look at us in a negative way, imagine the kind of reaction that can cause. Okay? And here are the battalion commanders who will think that you have withdrawn from the battle through fear. Okay? Arjuna is supposed to be courageous. He is supposed to have no even any kind of trace of any fear. As a Kshatriya, full of courage, full of this sense of responsibility. And when he says, when the battalion commanders are looking at him as an equal, and even more than an equal, and saying, look at this guy, he is abandoned his battlefield because of fear. What can be worse than that, than to be judged in that particular way? So this is again the common man's point of view, that besides all the people in the community, even your own peers will think of you in this negative way, and therefore this objections which you are having against this war will be seen as if you are scared, as if you are frightened, and therefore you are running away from there, and therefore people will begin to make fun of you and laugh at you. So this again is the way in which Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna in terms of the consequences of not taking up his dharma. Okay, not only that, but he is telling him the consequence of taking up the righteous war and fighting the righteous war. What are the consequences of that, and what are the consequences of not fighting the war, not only at different levels, but right to the way of talking about from the common man's point of view. Okay. So you can see Lord Krishna is kind of having a holistic solution, as it were, and addressing different aspects of Arjuna to make him understand that in any case, whichever way you look at this particular situation, there is no choice for you but to fight this war. And we'll see how he develops the rest of the argument in the next 3 or 4 verses. And then he switches over, he switches gear, because so far he is talking about Sankhya Yoga, Sankhya, the knowledge, and then he is going to switch over to Yoga, and then he described all the various aspects of that particular way of thinking and why Arjuna should be standing up and fighting. So we'll continue next week, and we'll finish with the prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kasyit Dukha Bhavet, Asato Ma Sargamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityur Ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.